some stills and some video footage of that app being used, and we'll share that with you.
Chris, GB News, Chris, you're on path 3 where recording will go through that screen, so if you're going to cut to that on path 3, all these 3 parts going out, you can.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
You can manage to sign that.
Great.
Anything else?
Sorry, I forgot to mention, if you are called on for a question, if you don't mind standing up, A, because it's better for the cutaway camera, and B, it just helps us pick up the audio as well. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, the government is launching a national conversation on the future of public services. At the moment, it is too hard to get what you need when you need it. The status quo is a legacy system of call centres, paperwork, and the need to tell your story multiple times to different parts of government with hours on hold and not knowing where you are in the process. In its place, the government will build a truly modern Britain where public services work for you when you need them. New digital public services that will be there at the most important points of your life. But first, we need to build the foundations for these new modern public services. And that is exactly what Digital ID is for. Digital ID will allow you to log in to the gov.uk app and, crucially, prove who you are. Because unlike an ordinary login, the Digital ID will allow us to bring services from across government together in one place in the app on your phone. This will become the front door to how you access public services, just like you do with online banking or shopping. You'll be able to access all of the services you need in one place, ensuring that they are personal, joined up, and easy to use. Now, the consultation we're launching today may seem like quite a technical consultation, but it is also deeply political too. Because when the public voted for change, they also voted for better public services. And this is exactly what Labour governments do at their best, building new innovative public services to support opportunity and access for all, rather than just the privileged few. From the NHS in the 1940s to the Open University in the 1960s to the Sure Start centres of the 2000s. Today, we are continuing that proud Labour tradition, building modern digital public services that provide opportunity and support for everyone. Because this is also about equality of access. We all know that the status quo rewards those who know how to play the system, those with the resources, the time, the connections, the confidence, and perhaps even sometimes the pushiness to navigate what often feels like a labyrinth of confusing and time-consuming checks, forms, rooms, and front desks. But it is often those doing shift work on irregular hours or on low incomes or caring for others who are then unfairly penalised and feel like they're at the back of the queue. We will change that. Digital public services won't just be more efficient, but they can also be cheaper to run too. Taxpayers are paying a lot for the public services that we are delivering. And the current system of paper forms, manual payment systems, and duplication means that every time you have to repeat your story to a different part of government, it's a second, a third, a fourth cost to the taxpayer. The numbers across government are eye-wateringly huge. The DVLA currently processes 45,000 letters each day. DEFRA uses 500 different paper forms, and HMRC handles over 100,000 phone calls a day. Digitisation of government services is about reducing all of that, both freeing up traditional routes on the telephone for those who need to use that route, but also maximising value for money for the taxpayer at the same time. Driving those efficiencies will be critical to making public services more affordable for the taxpayer in the long term. Now, Digital ID will be free to access for anybody who wants to use it, and it will be built on three core principles. First, it must be useful. It needs to be easier than the old telephone and paper-based systems. Second, it must be secure. You will have more control over what data you share, and we expect nothing less than the levels of security you have in your banking app. And it must be for everyone. We will not leave people behind, and if you struggle with technology or traditional forms of identity documents, we will be there to help you reward the benefit of these services too. Now, we know there's been a significant level of public interest in Digital ID, which is why we're launching a national conversation today, so that you can have your say on how it will be built and used in the future. And given that level of national interest, I have decided that we should do this consultation differently, to do our politics a little bit differently. Instead of just filling out a form on the gov.uk website, we will be selecting a representative sample of the entire population to form a people's panel. They will help us debate the difficult questions find ways forward, and help us to build a system that will win the trust and support of the public at large. Their outcomes and their views will be part of the legal consultation, a first for government. And this consultation will seek feedback on how to build a system that is useful for the public. For example, we will ask which government services are currently the most frustrating to access and which could be improved by digital access, perhaps like getting your driving license or checking your tax code. We will ask the question of what does digital inclusion look like in our local community so that people know they have someone nearby to help when they need it. And we will ask questions about age and other service access requirements in the consultation to help us think about what services we bring forward in the years ahead. On data, our baseline is to start with as little data as possible, enough simply to prove who you are and nothing more. But if more is needed to support other services in the future, for example, by looking at address information, we will of course explore that with the public. Now, I appreciate this might feel a bit hypothetical, and so I want to show you what a future of government by app underpinned by digital ID might look like in the future. And I have a prototype here on my phone and on the screens that you will see around the room. Now, I want to be really clear, this is not current policy, this is a prototype, but it shows you what we think the world might look like for public services in the future. In the initial stages, the digital ID system could start by helping you complete simple administrative tasks, like proving your right to work digitally when you start a job. But in this demo, I'll show you how the app could evolve to become a one-stop shop for accessing public services with your digital ID, doing the work for you, joining up these services so you don't have to do it yourself. And as I've said before, all of these applications and services and the use of the app will be entirely voluntary and up to you to decide whether you wish to use them. Now, like your banking app, you start by using your mobile device's Face ID to open the app. On the home screen, you'll see handy reminders about what you need to do or tasks that you need to complete. Here, for example, it's telling you that you need to get your vehicle tax payment sorted soon. And instead of having to then go to a different website and fill in a different form, you can just click a button and pay for it then and there. Quicker, easier, simpler. And if you have a child, for example, you'll be able to see whether you qualify for free childcare hours here in the app without having to look at a whole number of websites, as is currently the case. You could also manage local services by telling the app which council you live in. You could even remind yourself on what day your bins are being collected, the most searched for term on local authority websites. And if you've got a local election, you can use the digital ID to prove your identity at the ballot box if you wish, and it will tell you which polling station to go to. Take another example, starting a new job. Here, Anna, this is Anna's app, has got a notification for an approval request to share information with her new employer, her right to work, her national insurance number, and her payee code. Instead of filling in forms and sending off a copy of her passport, she can do it just with the click of a button and share it automatically with her employer. As you know, by the end of this Parliament, a digital right to work check will be required when you start a new job. You can use this system if you wish to when it becomes available, or you can use current means with a passport or e-visa if you prefer. Finally, I'd like to show you the gov.uk wallet. This is where the new digital proof of identity will be stored alongside digital versions of other documents like your driving license, all in one place. This is where you'll be able to pull up your digital proof of identity if you wish to use it, for example, to prove your age in the pub. You'll notice we haven't actually included what the digital ID will look like yet, as that will be decided based on feedback from the consultation. And we've also not branded it or given it a name because we want it to reflect the use cases that will be defined by the consultation and the People's Panel. A big question that people ask is who is going to build this? And the answer is we are. This system is a piece of sovereign technology capability, and the responsibility for the design, build and running of it will be within government with the support of the Government Digital Service. It will not be outsourced to a private company. Data relating to the digital ID will always be stored in line with standard government practice, just like how your passport or national insurance data is stored today. There will also not be one new single central database of all of this information in the centre of government. It will remain situated where it is. For instance, data about your benefits entitlement will stay with the Department for Work and Pensions. Your driving data will stay with DVLA, your tax data with HMRC. The difference here is that with your digital ID, by being able to prove who you are, we can bring all of that information together in one place for you in the app. We cannot continue on this two-track process where services in the private sector, in banking and shopping and all the other things that we do in our day-to-day lives are fast, easy and digital. And then when you come to the public sector, they're slow, clunky and disjointed. Modernisation through the use of technology is the only viable path to modern public services that are both affordable to the taxpayer and there when you need them most. No political party should be trying to conserve the status quo, which is not acceptable, or threaten to tear down the public services that often the most vulnerable people in society rely on. This is why this government is doing the hard work to build the foundations of the modern state and for public services of the future. I encourage anyone who has views to engage with the consultation and have your say. You can do that by searching Digital ID Consultation or by contacting your local Member of Parliament. Thank you, and I will now take questions. Katie Austin.
Thank you. So when the Prime Minister initially announced plans for a digital ID, he said it would be mandatory for people to work in the UK to try and tackle illegal working. Now you're framing it as about helping everyone access public services. Why the change?
So the Prime Minister wanted all ID verification when you start a new job to be confirmed digitally. At the moment, it is already a legal obligation if you're in work and when you start a new job on your first day to go and see HR and prove your legal right to work in the UK. But in the vast majority of cases, that means taking a passport or a driving license in physically and your new employer photocopying it or scanning it, and it's a manual process. That means that for some people, they think it's quite easy to work illegally in the UK labour market, to get hold of fake passport documents or driving licenses to be able to do so. What the Prime Minister announced is those checks will be digital from 2029, that the digital check will be mandatory. That means that we'll have more insight into which employers are doing those checks and which are not. The slight nuance, which I've pulled out in the statement today, is that you can use the digital ID and the gov.uk app to do that if you wish, but if you don't want to, you don't have to, and you can use existing other providers with your passport or e-visa to conduct those checks, but the employer has to make sure that that's being done digitally, not manually. Sam Coates.
Thank you very much, Sam Coates, Sky News. Digital ID is going to cost probably more than £2 billion. Isn't there a danger that that's a lot of money for not very much, particularly given everything that's initially out of scope, like the NHS and HMRC, certainly in terms of what can be delivered in this Parliament? Looking at the prototype, I mean, how many times do you expect people to use it to get married? Like, that seems to be one of the few things that it's useful at the moment. And just on the wider agenda, President Trump spoke to President Putin yesterday, and suddenly the US administration is talking about allowing countries to buy Russian energy, who buy Russian energy, that they can sidestep sanctions. What does Britain say about that?
On the question of how often you wish to marry, that's a question for you, Sam. I won't suggest anything for you or anyone else in the room. I mean, on cost, there have been estimates already done by government that says that if we're able to digitise lots of these customer services, we can save tens and tens of billions of pounds every year. Tens of billions of pounds a year that is currently going on very unproductive call centres, lots of paper shuffling, slow processes. If we can just automate that and make it more digital, you free up taxpayers' money either to go on other priorities, like the front line in the NHS, or quite frankly, to give it back to taxpayers in the years ahead because we've made public services cheaper to run. On sanctions, of course, our sanctions remain in place, and our position in supporting Ukraine hasn't changed. And whilst, of course, there's a lot of attention, rightly, in the Middle East right now, we must also remember that we stand shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians in the face of the illegal invasion from Russia, and we won't be distracted from that by other things going on in the world. Rhys Williams.
Hello, Rhys Williams, ITV News. You've mentioned a few times there about the huge efficiencies you think you can make here. How many civil service jobs do you think you can cut?
It's a good question. I can't give you a number today. And it's not just about civil service headcount, it's just about time. So one example I often rabbit on about quite a lot is the childcare system. This is something I would love to be able to bring into the app in the years ahead once we've built the technology. At the moment, if you qualify for childcare help, you have to log on to the HMRC website every month. You get 20% off your fee, but you've got to calculate that yourself. You've then got to process the card payment yourself. You've then got to find your nursery provider on the website and do the payment. And then every 3 months, you've got to log back in and reconfirm your income and your work. And then alongside that, you've got to get a paper form from the council and a code that you have to give to your nursery provider physically, and every quarter you've got to go in and sign that you're still allowed the entitlement. And it's quite hard at the moment to find any searchable database of what nurseries and childminders are in your local area, what their Ofsted rating is, what the cost of it is, whether they do the cooking or have a garden. The whole thing is completely maddening. And if parents are busy at work, they're getting childcare help, they should just be able to do it simply on the phone. And that is the type of thing we're trying to do. By doing that, not just in childcare, but across other public services, you can see the enormous potential for saving cost in the system because you're not having to go through this slow and continuous process that we have now to do lots of these things manually. Chris Hope.
Chris Hope, GB News. Thank you very much, Mr Jones. I was there in September when the PM announced this. It was then to tackle illegal migration. Was he wrong to say that? Did he mislead people about the purpose of what you're doing here? It's voluntary now. Will it ever become compulsory? That will worry a lot of GB News viewers. Papers, please, and that idea being brought to bear in the UK. And is this the beginning of Big Brother, watching what people do all the time? What about privacy? That matters too.
Yeah. On whether this is mandatory or not, it is not mandatory. We'll bring legislation to Parliament later this year, and it will say on the face of the bill that it is voluntary. And if any government in the future wants to change that, they're going to have to come back to Parliament and change the law in order to make that happen. On privacy, we're working on the basis that when people use this app, they will have more access to what information they are sharing already with public services and more control about whether to do that than they can today. Government already holds quite a lot of information on people, passport, driving licenses, GP surgery notes, you can go on and on. But if you ever try to get access to any of that right now, it's kind of impossible to do so. So this presents an opportunity to increase privacy and increase control by members of the public over the data they share when they're accessing services. On right to work checks, the Prime Minister was clear that the outcome he wanted to achieve was twofold. First, to have much tougher enforcement of illegal work in the UK economy, and second, to say to those criminal gangs who are bringing people to the UK, you can no longer tell them that we'll give you a fraudulent passport and you'll just be able to work illegally in the UK because no one will check. At the moment, these right-to-work checks are manual. Enforcement officers only know to go and check in a workplace if they get a local tip-off. With a digital system, they'll be able to see that the vast majority of businesses conducting business will have done all their checks and it all looks fine. And then they know to go and look at these other areas where it looks like there's a gap. And that means we'll be much more productive at tackling illegal work in the UK economy and things like modern slavery and forced labour as well. Laura Beveridge.
Hi, Laura from Politics Joe. You mentioned there that this will be done in-house to assuage any concerns people might have about private contractors. But security concerns have already been raised about One Login, the system at the heart of digital ID. What assurances can you give to the public that their data won't be vulnerable to malevolent actors?
Yeah, well, the first thing is just to say that One Login is an important program, but it is separate to digital ID. One Login is trying to make it easier for you to log into however many websites you want to log into across government, whereas a digital ID will bring all of those together in the app. And I'll just say that Britain's actually quite far behind internationally on this. If you look at not just the obvious places like Estonia or Singapore, but if you look at Australia, if you look at Belgium, if you look at Denmark, these countries are vastly ahead of us in building these modern public services, so we can learn a lot from them about how to build this system. And by doing it in-house, we can work with our intelligence agencies to make sure that we're kind of at the cutting edge of that, which is exactly what we expect to do. Ben from The Times.
Thank you very much. You described the childcare system there. People will be very concerned about how difficult some government services are to act, but those are built by civil servants. You say you're not going to use the private sector. How do we know this is going to be better? And secondly, there's a section in the consultation about police and the use of facial recognition. Campaigners say, and I read it, reads like a primer for digital ID being a gateway for police to turn ID photos into mugshots. How can you reassure people that that is not the case?
Yeah, the digital ID system that we're building is not a mandatory ID that you need to have available to show to the police or anybody else. If you wish to use it, you can, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So any concerns the public have about how this interfaces with law enforcement, please just be reassured that's not what this is about. This is about making customer services easier to access and use across government. And in terms of building better systems in government, I mean, I agree with you. Lots of our officials work very hard, but because of a whole load of problems in the way that government works and collaborates together, other than maybe the passport office and I think maybe the driving license system, I can't think of many public services that I would say are good enough in terms of the customer experience when you compare that with the private sector. That's not to undermine the hard work that public officials and civil servants do, and they try really hard, but we have to enable them to make better services, and building these modern digital foundations will allow them to do that in the future. Tony Driver from the Telegraph.
Thank you. This policy was first announced almost 6 months ago, and now you come to the public and you don't know what this is going to be used for, you don't know how much it's going to cost. It was going to be compulsory and now it's not. And a lot of these quite big policy questions seem to be answered by a group of 100 random people. What do you say to your critics on the Labour benches who say if the government wants to do stuff, they need to just get on and do it and stop messing around with consultations?
Look, it's important that we engage with the public on this issue. I mean, there's clearly been something that has sparked the interest of many people across the country. And quite frankly, if we'd pre-decided what to do and come here and told you today, you'd flip your question and say, why did you not listen to the public first? So I'm completely relaxed about the idea that we're taking the time to talk to different people from different places across the country to make sure that we're building something that ultimately they will want to use. Because if we didn't do that and it wasn't successful, then we're not going to achieve the outcomes that we wish to achieve. Okay, Sophie from the Mirror.
Hi. So in your speech, you said that some people are playing the system when it comes to navigating confusing public services. Can you give some examples of how people are playing the system and how digital ID will then help with that? And a second quick one, you obviously said that passports will be able to use for digital right-to-work checks. When can we expect to have digital passports?
On gaming the system, what I mean is that at the moment, people who have the time or the means or the capability to just keep on at people often end up getting to the front of the queue because they end up being a bit annoying to the person on the end of the phone. And so if you've got the time to ring and ring and ring and say, where is the answer, where is the answer, where am I in the process, where am I in the process, you do get treated differently to the person who doesn't have the time to do that. And that's just inherently unfair because it means you're not prioritizing people in a fair way in terms of their need for support. So the whole point with this is that it should be easy, simple and accessible to everybody. So if you are caring for people, if you do work long shifts, if you're on a regular, whatever reason it might be that you don't have the means to continually challenge the system for the outcome, it makes it easier for everybody, which lifts everybody up and means that people don't need to spend the time hassling government departments and services as they may have to today to get an answer. Oh, and on passports, you can already digitally verify your right to work with some employers today. There are companies that have been built in the UK, like Yoti, and there are others who are great examples of British startup companies, where if you work for some larger employers, instead of scanning or photocopying the passport, they will get you to use the phone just to digitally verify it. And basically that will be available to all employers because it will be a requirement to digitally verify it from 2029. That is different to a digital passport because you're still going to need your physical passport to travel because other countries need to be able to check it and engage with it. And they won't be able to do that with the app, but they can do it with your traditional passport. Craig from the Metro.
Yeah, hello. You said in your speech there that this would be the foundation for new modern public services, but then at the same time you're saying it's also completely voluntary. So how do you square those two things? Is the idea that it's just going to be so completely fantastic that people are just going to migrate towards that and you'll be able to build everything off it?
Yes. Martina from The Sun.
Thank you very much. In the past, people had national insurance stamp cards showing how much they'd contributed and paid into the system. Could a digital ID eventually show people their contributions and also what benefits, for example, not just the childcare vouchers, are entitled to from the state?
So at the moment, you can access different bits of information like that. HMRC, for example, has an app which is, they've worked really hard at it, it's reasonable, but it's not perfect. DWP, you might have access to certain websites to see what entitlements you have. I've already mentioned the childcare system that you can log into. So you can get to some of that information right now, but you need to log into different websites from other departments in order to look at individual bits. What we're trying to do here, with the exclusion of health data in the NHS app, is say that all other interfaces across government should be able to come to you in your app on your phone if you decide that's what you want to do, so that you don't have to go away and log into all those websites, and it's just accessible for you on your phone. Sam from the Mail.
Thank you. So what weighting will you attach to the People's Panel compared to the sort of the wider public consultation? For example, if the consultation is strongly against one aspect of the digital ID, but the People's Panel is in favour of it, will you proceed with that aspect? Why would the public not think that this People's Panel is an attempt to stitch this up? Thank you.
So look, the People's Panel is a gamble on my part, right? Because I'm saying, hey, we should get 100 people together from across the country and talk about it, and they get to vote at the end of it to decide whether they like it or not, or what conditions they put around it. And I've made it a legal part of the government's consultation. That's never been done before, because in many ways you're giving up control a bit around the process. But I actually think that's really important, because the conversations we'll have with the People's Panel, and the people who will come will be selected scientifically by the company we're working with to make sure they're a representative sample of different ages and demographics and backgrounds and their views of this programme already and where they come from across the country. The process they will go through is one that we want to tell the story of to the public as well. So it's not just ministers and officials looking at what you've typed in on the website and deciding what we think about it, but actually is a much deeper and more extensive conversation with the sample of the public. And I think actually for issues where there is high levels of public interest and some controversy, doing that is a new and different way of doing our politics, which I hope will result in members of the public thinking that they have more say, more power, more access to how these decisions are being made. And I think that's a good thing. Kieran from The Guardian.
Thank you. Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. Can you give us more of a sense of just how extensive you think this could be? In countries like Estonia, it's used to pretty much access every public service available. Could you end up using it for NHS services, which is obviously not currently the plan? Could you end up using it for education services, which is again not currently the plan? And is there anything you'd specifically rule out? And can you make sure that future governments also stick to that?
Yeah. So the main exclusion we've made at the start of this is that the NHS app and your health data will be separate. That's because the NHS app is already pretty well developed. We spend a lot of money on it. It works reasonably well, and we don't want to slow down the development of the NHS app by kind of aligning it to the starting position we're in now with digital ID. Also, people rightly want their health data often treated differently to their kind of paying the tax disc for their car data, which is understandable. Otherwise, all other government services have the potential, when there is a customer-facing interaction, to come into the app. We're going to have to spend the next year consulting on this and legislating for it. We then start building it in 2027. There'll be some simple things that will come forward by the end of the Parliament. As I say, maybe tax disc payments, some administrative tasks. The right to work check will be available if you want to use it from 2029. But the big prize, when you're looking at things like the childcare system or your pension statement or HMRC data, that's really a prize for the next Parliament, because we're going to have to take some time to get it up and running in the first place. But it will all be governed by legislation. We'll introduce a bill later this year, but I expect to build in a mechanism that means that government and any future government will have to go back to Parliament for a check and balance and approval for each service that comes onto the app in the future. So there'll be a continuing conversation and democratic accountability with Parliament as the app is developed over the years ahead. Chris from the FT.
Thank you. Just on the People's Panel point, are you saying you'd like that to be used more widely in government for other contentious issues? I mean, assisted dying, maybe others. And on the scheme itself, you've obviously started from quite a minimalist point of view in terms of maybe not having children in it, maybe only having a very core set of personal information. Is your hope that it will prove so fantastic that people will want to include other information, perhaps put their children in there because that will allow them other uses which they will quite appeal to them? And related to that, what is your ask to the private sector about how they should use this to make it work best, for anything ranging from getting a mortgage to buying a pint? What do you want them to do?
On the private sector, because the digital ID card in the app will have the equivalent standing as your passport, it means that private sector companies can take a high level of confidence that when you say you are who you are, that is true. That, in the first instance, could have a huge impact on the very high levels of online fraud that currently happen today. people impersonating other people in marketplaces with banks, trying to persuade people to send money to different places, fake charitable kind of requests for fundraising emails that people think is from someone when it's not from someone. So private sector companies could, if the customer and they wish to do so, use this to help tackle a lot of widespread fraud online, which I think would be a huge benefit. It also has the potential, and it's potential at this stage because we're just launching the consultation, to help tackle some issues where, for example, those that are excluded from getting access to bank accounts and they're financially excluded because maybe they can't afford a passport and the bank doesn't know whether the documents they have give them enough confidence or not that they say who they are. If they've got a free digital ID that we have verified for them, then you may be able to open up these services to people who are currently excluded. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there for the broader private economy as well as for more modern public services. And on data, as I set out to Parliament today, we want to collect as little data as possible to enable you to log in and prove who you are. As services come online in the years ahead, it may be that you want to share your address data because you're accessing a service that requires your address. And of course, we're going to have those conversations in the consultation. But the key point is that the user, the citizen, with their app, they're going to be in control of it. So if they want to share that data to access the service, they can. And if they've done it and don't like it, they can turn it off. And if they don't want to do it, they don't have to either. And that will free up the more traditional services on the telephone for those who really can't use digital tools and want to be able to call in and speak to someone. Okay. I think that is... Yes. Do you want the app on it?
Yes, please.
There we go. Stop laughing, everyone. It's a serious photo.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody.